Right now, as we mentioned, Queen's Park and Ottawa up on Parliament Hill are both off for their Christmas recesses. Be middle of January or either into February, I guess, before some of these folks are going to get back to work again. But let's pause and maybe do some reflection here and talk about what could be happening going ahead politically in both places in 2023. And to do so, pleased to welcome back to the program John Best, publisher of the Bay Observer. Good morning, John. Thanks for being with us again today.
Great to be with you, Bill.
Let's start off with the federal or the provincial situation here. It's been a rather tumultuous last couple of months for the Ford government right now. There's some key issues, of course, that they've tried to tackle with. There's an Angus Reid survey that I was looking at yesterday that basically says an awful lot of people in Ontario don't think this government's doing a very good job. As a matter of fact, they seem to feel at this stage that the government doesn't even reflect the priorities of most of the people.
Well, there's no question about that, Bill. I think it showed his Ford's approval rating down around 34%. And, people, the big thing everybody's concerned about is the cost of living, not just the rents, but, just go to a grocery store or go anywhere. The only thing that's moving in the right direction is gasoline these days. But the interesting thing about that poll, because I looked at it as well, so Ford's approval rating, clearly his approval has dipped significantly. It was up in the 60s during COVID, which, that's probably an aberration. But it was, coasting along in the 40s for quite a while. It's down to 34 now, which is the lowest it's been since he was elected. But when they ask people, what party they're going to vote for, he's up around 37, which is getting very close to, where he went out at the election time. So they don't like the job he's doing, but they don't see an alternative is what I take away from that.
Well, and that's really, I guess, a reflection of what's going on in the building itself at Queen's Park. I mean, there's an interim Liberal leader. I mean, the NDP just named their new leader. Merritt Stiles has got that job now. In the absence of any information or any opposition to what the government's doing right now, I don't want to say Ford has a clear path here, but there's not too much pushing back right there.
No, and the Liberals in that race, they're sitting at around 20%. So that's just death knell for the NDP, because if 20% of the electorate is going to still vote Liberal, which would mean they probably won't really win that many seats, but that's a vote that really makes it very difficult for the NDP to gain a lot of seats.
What's interesting about this, and we'll talk about the federal situation too, because I think there's a lot of similarities in the challenges facing going ahead. According to the Angus Reid survey here, the number one issue for Ontarians is cost of living and inflation, not housing, which the government seems to be focusing on. Healthcare is number two, not surprising, and then housing affordability is there. The government's got some big challenges coming up here in the next couple of months to deal with a number of these issues. And I want you to, if you could, John, rate exactly how they've handled some of these things in the last couple of months in particular. Environmental issues and climate change. They talk the talk sometimes, but of course, then the incursion into the green belt falls under that category, which I guess explains to a certain extent why some people are pretty disenchanted with how they're doing things.
Yeah, well, I think frankly they get a C minus or a D on almost all of the above. I mean, clearly they're not responsible for the inflation that we're dealing with, but I think the problem with this whole Bill 23, this whole housing approach, is that it's just not well explained. So the narrative is sort of this. Whatever is wrong with the cost of housing right now rests with the cities. The cities are completely to blame. So the solution is to take away pretty much any power they have to control what housing looks like in their markets. And if we could just free up a bunch more land, that would solve the problem. And I just don't think people are believing that. It's not clearly laid out how that's going to work. And so you sort of go from, and then they throw in the strong mayor system, and there isn't, to my mind, and I wrote something about this, there isn't a shred of evidence that the strong mayor system is needed to solve this housing problem. So it's just kind of a cluster of, sudden, anytime governments make sudden sort of jerky moves, people get ill at ease. And this is what we're looking at. Why they're not explaining things better. It may be that they really don't know what they're doing, and that would be really scary. But there's just a lot of activity that doesn't point a straight line in people's minds that this is going to really help with the housing.
Well, and maybe the way they dealt with the education issues over the last couple of months is a pretty good indicator of that. With the education workers, of course, the support staff in schools, pretty much pulling the plug on the negotiations, threatening to use the notwithstanding clause, and then backing away and saying, okay, we're not going to do that after all. Indecision is not something that's going to build confidence in the public.
No, and when you're talking about the notwithstanding clause, it's kind of like a gun that's in a holster in a sense. So even though we backed off on the use of it during the labor dispute, everybody knows that he is prepared to use it. Everybody knows it's a tool that he has. And he has used it in the past for trivial things like the stickers on the gas pumps in his first year. Mm-hmm. So we know it's there, and so then when he comes along with something like this, the one that really bothers me, frankly, Bill, is this strong mayor system. When you start having to actually tinker with democracy in order to, I don't care what the issue is, and how important it is that we do make some progress on affordable housing, but if you have to surrender democracy for it, it seems to me that that's a major fail. And the idea and John Tory, frankly, has disappointed me greatly. I think we all thought of him as kind of a red Tory, maybe even left of a red Tory during his 2 terms as mayor. But for him to go in and request to have the power to overturn 2/3 of his council when it was already cut in half by Ford, it just leaves, you ask yourself, does this really do anything to solve the problem? And is there any sense that this power would be taken away at some point if indeed they did manage to make some progress on housing? I think it creates dis-ease on the part of people.
Oh, it does. And they had a city council meeting yesterday in Toronto. And Tory, of course, is trying to push his own idea for housing. And the pushback he was getting from the council, it was less about housing and more about who do you think has the power here. So, and I can only see that continuing with that council and with Ottawa's council, and who knows else who's going to get those powers in the next couple of months. Because Hamilton, I guess, is in line. London could be in line for this as well. It's not going to make for a very workable environment, I guess, for those city halls once that's happening. If I could, though, I got a couple of minutes left. I want to shift over to what's happening federally. And one thing that I've noticed right off the bat, and I think it's pretty obvious, Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau don't like each other. I mean, I don't think there's even a professional respect there between the two of them. And it's becoming personal, even some of the comments they're making. Poilievre's speech to his caucus yesterday, the last meeting that they had before the holidays here, John, painted a very bleak picture of Canada. It kind of reminded me of Donald Trump's inauguration speech, when he basically said that, the city is in ruins, the country's in ruins, and I'm the only one that can fix it. Poilievre seems to be adopting that mantra for his move towards whatever's going to be happening in 2023.
Yeah, I think he's got a real challenge in front of him because, his whole approach has been completely negative. We haven't seen, sort of a positive vision. It's all about what the other guys have done that's not working. And I think he's almost hoping that he can capitalize on Trudeau's unpopularity. And so it's going to be more like a negative force in the sense that it's not his vision of Canada that we would vote him in on. It's more a case that we're just so sick of Trudeau that somehow he can slip past the post. I'm not sure it's going to work. I think he made a mistake this week, in the last month, in the by-election in Mississauga. That seat was a seat that Stephen Harper captured when he formed his first majority government. And those Mississauga and those Peel region seats, those are the ones that Poilievre's got to pick up if he's got any hope of winning an election. Right now, he's 3 points ahead of the Tories, but we know that, or the Liberals, but we know that his vote is so inefficient. Massive majorities in Alberta where he doesn't need them. I don't think his 3 point lead is enough to come up with really a different result than what we got with the two previous leaders. So
It was interesting.
He's got to change the message, I think, at some point.
Well, people don't like negativity. I mean, they may actually gravitate to it because they don't like the leader, they don't like the government at some point. But stuff that makes you feel uneasy, like negativity like that, eventually starts to wear on people, and they finally just say, look, I got to tune this guy out or this person out. And I'm not sure if that's going to happen to him or not. But, I've seen two articles now from the folks that are covering Parliament Hill on a regular basis, and one suggesting that maybe Poilievre has already peaked. And the other is that not that the pandemic is behind us yet, but 2023 is probably going to be where the government's really going to have to tackle some of these issues. They can't simply say, well, we've got a pandemic, we can't do what we want to do. They're going to have to come up with some pretty solid programs. So that's the pressure on Justin Trudeau. But the similar pressure on Poilievre is, all right, how would you do it? All right, if you were the prime minister, stop telling us that he's wrong. Tell us what you would do to change it. And he hasn't answered that yet.
No, he hasn't answered it, and frankly, it's not just his message, but I think his personal style. He's sarcastic. That's the tool he uses in the House. And if you go back into your history books, Arthur Meehan was a brilliant conservative leader back in the 1920s, but his personal style was very acerbic, very sarcastic. And it just didn't appeal to people, and he wasn't successful. And I don't see anything in, like, Ontario is where it's all going to happen. Let's face it, Bill. There's no growth for Poilievre west of Ontario. He's got pretty much every seat that he's ever going to get. Not much growth, I don't think, in Quebec and Atlantic Canada. So he's got to pick up a significant number of seats here in Ontario. And I don't see anything in his messaging that would appeal to people that live in this province yet.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to see. By the way, we're going to have Jagmeet Singh on the program a little bit later on. I'm sure we'll ask him some of the same things about what's going to be happening and whether that support with the government's going to continue through 2023 or if we're going to have to go to the polls. John, as always, thank you so much for the time today. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Bill.
John Best, who is the publisher of the Bay Observer, with a look at what's going on federally and provincially.